Welcome back to Pulp Culture Plus, your bonus hit of one-on-one deep dives with creative talent from Australia and around the world. The show where we unpack the process, the passion, and everything in between about being creative. On this week's show, our guest is someone who has been a mainstay of the Aussie comic world since 2007. If you spent any time at Aussie comic conventions or keeping an eye on Gestalt Comics, you would already know his work is a total visual feast. He's a co-creator behind the bone-crunching superhero epic Unmasked, the Sinister, and also the long-running cult favourite webcomic SAWBONES. Whether he's diving into sword and sorcery in the TALGARD anthology or bringing old god champions to life, his style is pure, unfiltered energy. He's a local Melbourne legend, visual wizard, and he's here to talk shop about the grind, the gear, and the glory of publishing comics. Please welcome to the show my friend and soon-to-be yours, Trev Wood. Welcome, Trev. Look, it's actually been a long time since you and I have done this. I think the last time we did this was during COVID when we did the Art Room All-Stars.
Yeah, that was so much fun. And I still get people saying how much they enjoy those and their kids go back to them again and again. Yay us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, it was a time when we all needed something to gravitate towards, and you've been a mainstay in the industry. You're currently doing, some interesting work with Gestalt, with Unmasked, the Sinister. Where did that sort of all take place?
How did I get involved in Gestalt and Sinister?
Yeah.
Look, I love what Gestalt do. I just think, I don't know if people notice this, but Gestalt have been doing comics in Australia for 20 years. They've always had this reputation for just quality comics. And recently, I think, their slogan used to be story first, and I love that. It speaks to me, and I'm very much I always want to sell a page and put my best work into it, but I always go for clarity over flash. And so the idea of comics being a storytelling medium is what draws me to comics. So when Gestalt, had that slogan, story first, I'm 100% on board. They've now changed their slogan their tagline to Australia's finest comics, and I think also really hard to disagree with that one too. So there's a whole bunch of reasons for working with those guys. They're amazing storytellers. Years ago, I did a portfolio. I went up to Sydney to get a portfolio review, and the portfolio team was somebody from Dark Horse Comics and Wolfgang from Gestalt. And the feedback I got from Dark Horse is absolutely what you'd expect. They are a major publisher. But Wolf's comments was the one that just hit me really hard. I'd done this beautiful, stunning page, vaulted ceilings, all this detail. It's the kind of thing that an art fan just, you draw and you go, I'm going to make people look at this page and be blown away by my skill. But it was somebody crossing a room. It wasn't, it was a stunning picture of somebody crossing a room. And that was the feedback, which was, you have wasted one of 22 pages showing somebody crossing a room. This is, while a beautiful piece of artwork, not storytelling. And I was like, oh my God. And I went back to the writer at the time saying, I've got to redraw this. And he's like, no, but that means I have to rework everything. But I just, always want to take on valuable criticism. And Wolf is just got an amazing eye for story and go, this is what's not needed. And so I just wanted to work with him specifically. So I was very fortunate to get to do a story with TALGARD. If people don't know what TALGARD is, it's an amazing anthology book from Gary Proudly. And the premise is that there's a single character or a single main character, TALGARD, and he goes on adventures. And each story is drawn by a different Australian artist. Same writer, same colorist, but all the stories are done by different artists. So it's an amazing, genuinely, I love talking about Gestalt books, other people's Gestalt books. It's harder to talk about mine. But TALGARD is an amazing book for people who want to get into comics or want to discover Australian artists, because there's these sampler boxes where you can go, I'm a Dean Rankin fan or a Katie Howard fan, or you can discover these artists and then from there springboard to more of those stories. So I got to do that story. I had so much fun. And yeah, I think that experience led Wolf to connect me with Christian Reed, who was looking for an artist on the Sinister.
Yeah, nice. And I mean, you're in good company with Gestalt too. And I mean, like you say, they are doing some really amazing things, especially introducing this sort of new arm with Indigiverse as well, and giving a voice to First Nations people. That's one of the things for me with my background in design is I've always seen that they really showcase their books really well when it comes to conventions, as well as presentation. Paper quality is always great, and their caliber of people that are part of the Gestalt name, everyone should be really proud of.
Absolutely. I think they are absolutely phenomenal eye for design as well. There's been quite a few things with the way the Sinister started and where it progressed to. A lot of that is Wolf's eye of going, and sometimes it's the Jaws effect, which is, Jaws was going to be all about a giant mechanical shark and it didn't work. And so that led them to actually make a better film where you don't see the shark.
Yeah.
And so with the Sinister, I think we originally intended for the book to be coloured. And as we were working through the book, we were just looking for the right colorist, and the colorists weren't available at the time.
Yeah.
But also, more and more black and white pages were coming in. And Wolf and I had the conversation and we said, I think this is going to, there might be a version down the track, a trade, which has got colour. But this is working really well in a black and white format. So why don't we lean into that? And the minute that happened, he started making these really striking covers that just punch you in the face when you walk around a convention floor. Everybody else has got these massive amounts of different colours. And the Gestalt booth has that big red, black splash across. And it really captures the eye. So I just credit the team for putting those effects in.
You said that you struggle, to talk about your own book. So maybe let's talk about your process and your style. And what's something in your process that would surprise people, like a weird habit or a shortcut or a rule that you swear by when you're doing a book?
There's a couple of things. I will go through and read the story once, then never look at the story, and then just be working on the page that I'm working on. Right. So I'm kind of often with the reader, page by page, going, cool, that's right, this person gets punched in the face, or this thing happens. And I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. The other thing is, and I think I'm getting better at this, but, you find me an artist who doesn't have imposter syndrome and I'll call you a liar. But I really struggle with confidence in my art. And so there's been quite a few times where Wolf has said, can you just thumbnail this stuff? And he gets back finished pages. And he's like, but I need you to make a change. I'm like, that's fine. I'm happy to redraw that whole page from scratch. But I often don't feel like a page is going to work until it works. I will, I can't visualize it as a real thumbnail. So I go straight to inks. So I'll often clean them up, or I'll try a different brush while I'm doing the inks and then go, that didn't work. Or that's great. And I'll go back and I'll draw another page. I'll go draw the previous pages using that brush, because I've recently discovered a really cool brush that just has that little bit of a broken nib. It just creates a little bit more organic texture to a page, because I am entirely digital like most artists these days, and I want to just create that sense that an artist was involved. And sometimes the digital feeling can feel a little bit too polished. So I've just discovered a new brush that I love, that just gives me that little bit of grit, that little bit of, the pens adding a touch of personality to the page.
When does a page or a piece click?
I think when I've got the movement down. I think I'm often happy with a page where the backgrounds are almost non-existent. It can be a real basic grid line, and I know that I can fill out that page and add the backgrounds. But when the movement is there, because it is really, especially with I really like to play with the camera to make these, especially with the Sinister, which is a very visceral visual, and it's a fighting book. I really like to bring the camera around, make it feel like a big action film, and so there are lots of low cameras, high cameras, camera angles that make the figure pop more at the screen. And it's really, because you're doing that, you're distorting, you're doing forced perspective so much, it's really easy to muck that up and have a figure look wrong. And it's not until the figures and the movements right that I go, okay, this panel's going to work. But yeah, the action is where I'm struggling. This is probably, that might be something surprising, which is I've been doing comics since 2007, always been a fan of comics and collected them, but I started doing a media degree, and it wasn't until I was, well into my 20s that I went, actually, I want to do this. Comics is my first love. I don't know why I'm doing this media stuff. So I started doing comics and doing a webcomic to force myself to draw every week. But it's taken until the Sinister. I got to draw, somebody getting stabbed in a Gestalt in the TALGARD story. A single thrust. I don't think I've ever really drawn a fight sequence up until now. So it has been an absolute learning curve, and something that I'll have to go and find a therapist and then talk to about of how much I'm enjoying drawing this violence, because it is it's not the violence itself, but it is the expressiveness of the human body in its violence, like a cool fight sequence. I don't know if you're watching it, but I'm loving Daredevil at the moment, and the way you can, over 5 seasons now of Daredevil, in the old season, you can reinvent a knee to the head, a flip, a punch, by finding the right angle, by finding the right little tweak of, okay, he's going to break his elbow, but is he going to break it with his hand over his knee? Is he going to... So that has been an absolute delight.
Where do you get your references from when it comes to sort of those action poses? Are you looking in books? Are you referring to things like Daredevil Born Again or other films like John Wick? Is it sort of a combination of multiple medias?
It's a bit of a combination. Christian is a phenomenally detail-oriented, and Christian's background is in writing, like Warhammer 40,000, things like that. And so he's incredibly lore-based, and he's got a headcanon for pretty much everything. So when I've been doing the Sinister, the brief I've been given is that the main character, the Sinister, is more of a Japanese, martial artist with really great traditional karate flows. The female character of the book, Strix, she's trained in and I'm going to butcher this, but there is a Greek martial art from ancient Greece. That's what they used to compete in, and I cannot remember the name of it, so I won't even try. But it's basically it's ancient kickboxing. It's mixed martial arts. It's a wrestling with punching and kicking, and it's a real, but it has a very particular form. And I've been trawling the internet trying to find specific references to that. It's not a very well known form, but at least it seems to be. It's referred to often as very similar to MMA. So I'm watching MMA, trying to work out how an MMA guy would fight against the karate person. I'm very fortunate I've got a couple of friends who are, third dans and things like that I can reach out to and go, I need to do a way to show that one character is really proficient in a punch, but then show the second character is really proficient in blocking that punch. And so it has to look like, both of them are doing their job well, rather than one of them can't punch and it's really easy to block. So that's a real skill and fun. And then sometimes I just, there's a couple of times where Christian's like, he pokes his eyes out like a Three Stooges. Then you just go, well, what's a fun way of breaking a bone, of hurting somebody, of what's the most visually interesting?
That's awesome. What's the part of creating comics that you probably enjoy the least? And like, when you get to that point, how do you push through?
Everything.
Okay.
No, so I genuinely, I love the challenge. It's, when I started, it was to get better at things. And so people often go, do you write your own stories? And I'd say no, because if I wrote my own stories, the writer in me would write things for a lazy artist. And I want somebody else to write without any consideration of whether or not the artist can draw this. So that that's a challenge for me. So when I was doing Sawbones, Jen Breach would write things and it would be, okay, this one's on a bicycle. Oh, cool. I've got to learn how to draw bicycles now. They're not fun to draw. Horses, a carnival scene, so Ferris wheels and carousels, and how do you draw or from interesting perspectives and different angles. And so I love the challenge. What I struggled with for years was blacks. Got some great advice from Gabe Hardman, who did The Invisible Republic and some really cool DC work. I showed him my work and he was like, this is great, but why are you so afraid of blacks? Just embrace them. And that's a man who knows blacks. And so I just started diving into, because it's really scary drawing a great face and then putting shadow across it. And you go, I'm losing that expression, or will people be able to read what's happening on the page if I'm covering it all with black? So that was scary. My current least favorite thing is color. It's why I don't color my own books, but when I am playing, when I'm not doing a project that I will color my own stuff to practice. But it's still something that I know I'm not good at and I want to get better at. But yeah, it is the thing that I loathe, but I'll keep doing.
Yeah, well, you play to your strengths, don't you? Is there ever been like you've had a project that didn't work out? What's it actually taught you from being in that situation?
Look, I mean, it's not that it hasn't worked out, but we haven't finished After the Snow yet. I have a completely drawn issue, but that is a series that requires a colorist, it requires a letterer. I think what I'm really bad at, and what After the Snow taught me, is that I am not a self-publisher. There are a whole bunch of things that I don't have the capacity to do. One of the reasons why I love working with Gestalt is that I give Wolf pages, and they magically get lettered, and they magically get put into InDesign, whatever an InDesign is, and whatever happens in InDesign happens, and it turns into a book that gets. And I show up at a convention, or I go to a comic book shop, and my books are on the shelf, and that takes away the sales, the need for a Kickstarter. I loathe the process of Kickstarting, and people who can do it, more power to you. But it is not I'm an introvert, and feeding the social media beast is incredibly difficult. Yeah, absolutely respect to people, and I think it is part of the job now. Let me be clear that to anybody who wants to get into comics, being a social media person is now part of the job. So you need to learn it, but it's also something that I really have to run up and take deep breaths before doing, because it is.
I suppose that's where we differ, isn't it? Because I'm very much an extrovert, and it's kind of my wheelhouse, and I kind of really dig that scene. I mean, you said that you've been, doing this from 2007 onwards. Like myself, you've probably seen, technology change. The way that things are done is different from when you first started. What are some of those things that you've sort of noticed, and has that helped you, in ways to accomplish whatever project that you're doing?
Everything has changed. I'm old enough to have not had access to Wacom's and things like that. When I was young, I shelled out a fortune for an early 20-year-old to get one of the very first tablets. And when I talk about tablets, they were laptops where you could draw on a screen. That's what a tablet was 20 years ago now. So I had an Asus and a Toshiba, laptops that ran, Windows, but you swiveled the screen around and you could draw on the screen. And that was life-changing for me, because when you don't have your own space when you're 20, you've got a bedroom and it's got to also be a workspace. If you want to watch, 20 years ago, televisions weren't in bedrooms and things like that. You had to go to the family room, or you wanted to go to a friend's house. Just having a laptop where I could draw. But then Clip Studio and all these and Procreate and all these programs that didn't exist it was Photoshop, and you were hacking together processes to draw art from a photo program, Clip Studio Pro. But Clip Studio Pro is a phenomenal platform, and one of the things that I really love about it is that you can have different types of layer in the same project. So a black and white layer will give you crisp, sharp lines, and then underneath that you can have a color layer, and that will give you the the aliasing that happens when you've got blended colors and things like that. But a black and white layer is sharp and clear, and when you blow it up or you blow it down, it doesn't go to heck because it is incredibly resilient. So yeah, having to draw black and white, doing line art, Clip Studio Pro has been phenomenal. Yeah. But everything, I'm old enough that everything has changed.
Everything's changed, right? From publishing, back in the day where it cost an absolute fortune to self-publish, to now where you can essentially get a fairly decent printer at not a lot of an expense and print it out yourself and publish yourself and get out there is very, very at the fingertips of anybody who wants to do it, right?
Yeah, I'm fortunate that I was coming on the scene at a point when that was just starting. It was I could print in color where people 4 or 5 years older than me were just that was impossible. You'd have to go to China for that and do a print order of 10,000 comics, and who can afford that? Whereas it was really almost the start of the print on demand thing. The thing that I think is sad or that we have lost is that SAWBONES ran for 7, 8 years or whatever on a personal server, and I promoted it on Facebook and things like that. But it had an audience because message boards and the algorithm wasn't driving everything. And I worry about new creators being discovered because they are very much at the whims of the Instagrams, the Facebooks, whatever those platforms are, and Global Comics or Webtoons or wherever you host them. It's really hard to define your audience these days in a way that was a little bit easier in my old man rocking chair back in my day.
I think I've mentioned this on the show before, but I had the privilege of interviewing Dan Slott quite a number of years ago, who obviously has done some amazing work when it comes to both Marvel and also DC. And one of the things that I remember a question was asked of him was, how did you get into comics? And he and it's always stuck with me that he said, when at the time that I was doing it, we didn't have social media, and I created my own door a bit like Monsters Inc., where each child has their own door. And he said, and you have to create your own door. And then once you've created that own door, that's where your audience will know to walk through. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think, and that's why, a couple of days ago, I did Free Comic Book Day and got to meet people. Conventions are incredible, especially in a country like Australia. Conventions, Free Comic Book Days, your local stores, and there's not enough local stores in Australia that support Australian comics. And so thank you to all those who do. Meeting people and creating those places outside of the algorithm that can discover you and create a connection with people, that's phenomenal.
Let's talk about influencers. If you could have dinner with someone, any 12 people alive or dead, who would it be? I'm going to spin that a little bit more and say, if you could collaborate with anybody, alive or dead, who would you want to do that with and why?
I do have a lot of influence. My favorite artists are Chris Samney, I think. Again, somebody, I think it might be something inherent in me where I crave what I don't have. I'm desperate to get better and improve my skills. So I'm looking for where my weaknesses are. And those are the guys that I'm like, you're doing witchcraft to achieve this thing that I can't achieve. Chris Samney has an amazing sense of, and it's a recurring theme in my influences. Chris Samney, Darwin Cook, Mug Mignola. It's far more about what they leave out than what they put in. And I think that, and somewhere on one of my walls up here, I've got an original Alex Toth picture. Alex Toth, for those who don't know, was an artist in the 50s, 60s, 70s. He was, as well as doing a bunch of comics, he created a lot of character designs for animation. Space Ghost, who younger people will know from Space Ghost Coast to Coast.
One of my favourite cartoons of all times, actually.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
But Space Ghost and doing any of those Film Nation or Hanna-Barbera cartoons was all about simplicity of line, because you had to draw it 12 times a second, so you had to make it clear, fast. So Toth, he had just pads just littering a house full of little doodles where he was trying to do a woman or a pilot or a plane or a man in a suit with the fewest lines. And so, I've got a couple of drawings of Toth around the house because the simplicity of line. I look at my artwork and I do not see any of that. I finish a page and I go, I think it needs more lines. But I wish that I did.
Really? I'm so surprised about that, because when you mention those influences, I can definitely see it. I mean, you put me on to Darwin Cook with the Parker books back in the day. So I have you to thank for influencing me when it came to Darwin Cook. Believe it or not, I was just reading that it's been 10 years since Darwin's passing, which I can't believe. It's gone so quickly. But again, those influences that you're speaking about, I can definitely see, especially with the work that you're currently doing.
And I read them, aggressively. I powered through them. They were the comics that I read when I was in my teens. Rick Leonardi's, Dan Jurgens, Walt Simpson. They were the comics I read in my youth. And I look at my page and I'm like, oh, that's all there on the page. At no point did I ever go, I want to draw like Dan. I want to draw like Walt. I was busy going, man, I wish I could be the next Darwin Cook. Missed this influence that obviously the onion that permeated me for the rest of my life is these comics from the 90s that were just so influential. The thing I love about Free Comic Book Day is it's that gateway drug of getting kids into comics. And clearly, once you're hooked, because I was jonesing to participate in Free Comic Book Day, and I just called Mal at Impact Comics and just said, I'm coming, make room for me. I was not invited. I invited myself.
You kicked out the door and you walked in and said,
Exactly,
too bad, I'm going to draw.
And Mal was talking to another comic book guy, and they're like, surprised Trev drove up there for you. And Mal said he would have sat on the stoop if I hadn't invited, if I hadn't.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, with having, those that would come up to either your table at a convention or during Free Comic Book Day, I'm sure some of them are asking you the question like, how do I get into comics? How do I start? How do I do this? What's that one piece of advice that you would probably give to those that are thinking about starting or have a project and they don't know how to begin?
A few things. Well, it depends. If I've got my own story to tell, I probably park my first. If I've got a story that is really important to me, that's the one that I'm not going to do. I'm going to sit on that, because you'll be a better storyteller in 5 years' time than you will be right now. So hold off that one that you love. Build an audience with projects that possibly aren't your favorite. You might have incredible 100 ideas, and this is one that you're happy to burn. But if this is the one that you go, this is my magnum opus, that's the one you park and get better as an artist. Start with short stories. You're going to discover things. One thing that always bothered me about SAWBONES is that I created this visual style and I didn't think I was going to be drawing it. I love drawing the stories, but I didn't think I was going to be drawing those characters for as long as I did. I got better as an artist, and I'd kind of drawn my way into a design that gave me no way to grow as an artist. You've got these stories. You want the ability to go, cool, I've played with that style for 4 pages, for 8 pages, for 10 pages, and then move on to the next thing and try something new. Whereas if you're doing a long form comic, that's what you're drawing. You're drawing in that style. You're drawing those characters for the next 64, 120 pages, potentially years of your life. So it's probably not worth it. The other thing about short stories is you have more opportunities to play with different artists, different writers, different collaborators. So you get to work with other people, and it's also what you want to put in a portfolio. But when I want to get a job with a Marvel or a DC, they're going to want to see 3 or 4 different examples of my work. And so doing short stories means I can do the story in space and show Marvel that I can draw a space story, and draw the Western and show Marvel I can draw a Western, and a third one that is a superhero and show Marvel that I can draw superheroes. Marvel, please hire me is what I'm saying.
What's next for you? Are we getting more Unmasked the Sinister? Are we? Is there something new coming out that you can tell us about?
There is one more story for Unmasked. One more issue of Unmasked, and I'm really fortunate. I think Christian Reed, the writer, is, if you haven't read the Lark Case Files, which is his novel series, it's phenomenal, and I think he wants to spend his time on those Lark stories. But because of that, Christian's thrown everything at the wall for this last issue. So I'm really looking forward to getting started. It's one of those things where, as I was saying, hold on to your good ideas, and Christian's this might be his last comic, so he's going to throw everything at the wall, and I'm going to gratefully take all that and pour it onto the page. After that, I've got 2 other projects. I don't think I can talk about either. One of them is hopefully an amazing period piece, and I've been playing with, it's like fairies and things that are kind of, again, outside of my wheelhouse, and Downton Abbey meets fairies, or Prejudice meets fairies or something, and that might be fun. And there's another Gestalt project that I'm keen on. I'd love to go back into the TALGARD world too, but as it currently stands, once you've had a bite of the apple, that's no more. But
just finishing off with our last question that we ask everybody on the show: who would you nominate for us to catch up with next?
Have you spoken to Gary Bradley yet?
Not yet, we haven't, no.
Gary is just, he's one of the sweetest men in comics.
He is.
He has a heart so big that cardiologists are worried about it, but also he's just, the breadth and width of his storytelling. He's done, Giant Monsters, Philosophy, Food Love, which is just the most beautiful story about how we connect food with our experiences. Absolutely, Gary. And also, he is a massive Fantastic Four fan, and Doctor Doom is one of my favorite characters. So him and I often just get together, and I'm like, okay, so how are we going to take over Fantastic Four?
Yeah, well, I look forward to that. I'll be the first one in line to get a Gary and Trev first issue.
Yeah.
But thanks for your time. It's always great to chat with you. It's been far too long, and I think everybody who's listening to this will agree that from listening to what you've had to say is some really great wisdom, and really grateful for your time. Thanks again, Trev.
Thank you.
Like what you're hearing? Tell your friends. Follow us on socials at Pulp Culture Pod. And if you're feeling generous, drop us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast platform.